Okay, well, thank you very much for coming back after lunch. I hope, like we heard about sustainability this morning, and I hope that lunch will sustain you for the rest of the day. I'm certainly hoping it will. I have, you can see from the agenda, the program for today, that the next session is an interview. I'm going to be interviewing using the Zoom platform somebody called Mark Koziel, and Mark is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the global network called Allinial Global. Now, let me start by just saying a few words of introduction for Mark. I've known Mark for a number of years, and I have to confess that I've often begged, stolen, borrowed from Mark his ideas and his vision for the profession, and in particular for small and medium-sized practices. Now, Mark became the President and Chief Executive Officer of Allinial Global in August 2020, and as you recall, that was the first few months after the pandemic hit, and Mark took on the reins of Allinial Global. And that was after a period of 14 years working at the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, the AICPA, which is the world's largest professional accountancy body. And in his role at Allinial Global, he leads a team of approximately 30 staff members, and is responsible for the likes of strategic planning, financial performance, and the association's overall growth and success. Now, Mark, if we go back into his past, some way back, he began his career at a large local accounting firm in Buffalo, that's New York State in the United States. And he then joined the AICPA and gradually worked his way through the ranks and reported directly to the Chief Executive, Barry Melanson. And most recently, the AICPA, he was the Executive Vice President of Firm Services. And that involved, for example, looking after the private companies practice section, or PCPS, of the AICPA. And the Chief Executive Officer of the AICPA once called the PCPS the national office for the 40,000 or more small and medium-sized practices, which are typically called CPA firms in the United States. So he headed that particular unit at the American Institute. Mark is well known, highly regarded within the profession. He often appears in the top 10 or top 100 ranking lists published by Accounting Today's most influential people in accounting, for example, and the International Accounting Bulletin's Global Accounting Power List, 50 Power List. So Mark has been an SMP, a professional accountancy organization staff member, looking after and supporting SMPs, and now leads a global alliance, many of whose members happen to be SMPs. But most importantly, Mark is, I think, one of the most knowledgeable persons and visionary persons I know in relation to the future of the accountancy profession, and specifically in relation to small and medium-sized practices. So Mark, after that, welcome. We're all here in Alicante. We'd obviously really love you to be here today. You would love the beach just outside, beautiful sandy beach, and we're expecting some temperatures in the high 80s Fahrenheit. But maybe next time you can join us. Anyway, welcome, Mark.
Thank you. And I did try hard, and unfortunately or fortunately, I'll be with our members in Europe in the middle of June, and I have to be in Vegas in between. I just couldn't keep doing the cross overseas twice in a row to make that happen, unfortunately. So thank you for having me, at least remotely.
Well, that's you're most welcome, Mark. And of course, you are, as a result, contributing to reduction in CO2 emissions by making sure that you don't fly across the Atlantic too many times. Thanks. So I think you get a gold medal for that. Nice. Mark, let me just open up with a couple of kind of what I guess are lowball questions for you. You know, the first one is you're your network is a global alliance. Obviously, you have a big presence in Europe, and I just wonder, from your knowledge, from your understanding, what are you currently seeing as the major challenges and opportunities that are facing small and medium-sized practices here in Europe?
Yeah, you know, it's not unlike many other places around the world. I think first and foremost, the challenges are people, right? Resources, and trying to find the right resources to get it done. You know, as we talk about transformation, a lot of the conversation I have, and if you look at what used to be the pyramid of the profession, that pyramid saying that the lower tier were our entry-level staff, all the way up to the top tier being the partners. But the bottom level of that pyramid, I have a slide that shows that the bottom, the two end triangles are virtually cut off, causing almost like a diamond effect, a flat bottom diamond, in the way that the model is going to change. And part of that corner is replaced by technology, and part of that is replaced by outsourcing. And I think that that's going to be where we see a lot of organizations go. We're already starting to see that in the US and Canada. We're seeing that somewhat in Latin America and Europe. Some of the challenges that I've been facing since joining Allinial really is trying to bring the amount of technology available in other parts of the world to Europe, and some of the language differences is what's causing some of these technology companies. We're having constant conversations to look at different things, like Datev, as an example, is a German-based company. They were written in German, but then they also created a Spanish version, which I think it's a very powerful technology. We have a partnership with them. It's important to find those technologies to be able to replace what used to be done by the people aspect of who we are, to be done by that. And then also looking at outsource options. I know South Africa, they're looking at multilingual applications to what they want to provide, and then looking at some of the other resources that are out there in Europe and in the Asia Pacific region, actually. So outsourcing, technology, replacing our people. But then the other piece is, you asked about opportunities as well. One of the big things, I believe, you know, we have our challenges finding people. Imagine what our clients are going through in the same way. And so one of the biggest growth areas, I think, globally, is shifting into this, what we like to call CAS, Client Accounting and Advisory Services. So it's a CAAS acronym that is both accountancy and advisory put together. And it's not just about us doing the bookkeeping, but us moving up level with the client and using data analytics in a way that we're able to provide greater insights to the client. The value stream to the client is far beyond what we may have done in what we would call traditional services. So that's providing a lot of opportunities. And I think also, you know, technology, as we're challenged by it, our clients are challenged by that too. Technological opportunities continue to advance. And we're starting to see, you know, you have ISO 27001. A lot of European companies are doing that. There are other types of technology assurance engagements that are happening if they're required to do it in other regulatory engagements around the world. I think that's going to converge on Europe even faster, that you're going to see even more assurance. And so who's going to do that besides the accountancy firms, bringing technology people in together to be able to provide that? Assurance is what we do. We need to own the space. We need to continue to do that. And then that leads right into ESG. You mentioned sustainability before. ESG is just another part of it. There are a lot of other types of professions out there who would love to grab that space, but the fact that we're going to be able to have that opportunity, be it we're already in doing a financial statement audit, some level of assurance over ESG should be done by the firms. And that's not just a big company.
Los harán las empresas, pero a quien está haciendo más daño es a las empresas más pequeñas todo esto.
Thank you, Mark. So in relation to assurance, we didn't have a chance this morning, unfortunately, to pursue the discussion around sustainability assurance. So I'd really like to sort of pick up on that thread. What do small and medium-sized practices need to do, and the profession more generally, to own that space? As you say, there is a risk that others will come and take it away from us.
Yep. And for us, as an example, we've already put together a community around ESG. We want firms starting to talk about it. And it's funny, I'm just this morning, or now your afternoon, but my morning still, I've been working on a slide to talk really about the evolution. We have seen this. I have lived this at the AICPA back in the day when there was no real level of technology assurance, web trust, if you will. These are things that have morphed over time. And we as a professional body created standards around what we now call our Service Organization Control Report, SOC 123. The SOC 2 report now is one of the most widely used around the world in providing assurance over technology. And that's moving into even the supply chain and into cybersecurity as well. And I think that the evolution of SOC can mirror how ESG is going to play. And so what's happening currently is that the largest of companies who have already been down the sustainability path in Europe has been far beyond anyone else around the world in sustainability initiatives. But it was kind of this kind of wild market out there where there were a bunch of different regulators and which one do you follow? And so all of that's starting to get consolidated and it's gaining maturity. But what's happening is, in order to provide a sustainability report or an assurance over sustainability, or now over assurance over ESG, many of our clients aren't going to be ready for that. And so what they first need to go through is a readiness assessment. So that's the advisory space of what ESG is going to be. So understanding ESG, helping your clients get ready, because what's going to happen is it's not that your client's going to wake up one day and say, gee, I think I want to file an ESG report tomorrow. Let me call my accounting firm and have them do that for me. What's going to happen is that their customer is going to come to them. And we had a great example of this in the US. And you mentioned, I am from Buffalo, New York. Buffalo's nowhere near New York City, even though we're in the same state. We're on opposite ends. But in Buffalo, small market, I had an ice cream manufacturer company in Buffalo. A friend of mine was the audit firm for that. And so they were the white label manufacturers of a grocery store chain. They're labeled ice cream. And that grocery store chain came to the ice cream manufacturer, small business, small firm, as their auditor. They go to that small business and said, we are filing a sustainability report. We are proving to our customers that we are reducing our water waste by 20%. You, ice cream manufacturer, manufacturing our labeled ice cream, have to prove to us that you've reduced your water waste by 20%. And so that proof report at that point in time, and by the way, that happened 10 years ago. And so now this maturity into what we have, there are many, many examples of that. The question is, have you had those conversations with your clients to say, what are your customers asking for? Which ones are most likely to file an ESG? We need to start having that conversation before you get surprised by it to make it happen. And so that first thing is the readiness assessment. Then it's implementing the controls that may not be there in place today for the monitoring of what's going to go forward as we do it. And then we test it again. And then we come to the level of being able to provide assurance. Now, if we helped implement the system, we may not be able to do the level of assurance. Hopefully we have relationships with other small practitioners that can provide that assurance report around what it is that we do. But the opportunities are going to be exponential as this continues to hit the market.
Yeah, and obviously, along with those opportunities, enormous challenges, especially in terms of staff being able to equip themselves with the necessary skills. I mean, well, necessary, perhaps they have the skills in assurance, for example, but perhaps they don't have the background in the sustainability subject matter. So I'm just wondering, what do you see firms needing to do, and indeed the professional bodies do, to help those SMPs build up the capacity and the expertise that is necessary to grasp the opportunities?
I think it's hiring and alignment, right? So one of the things that we've been doing is, so we've identified, and it's probably in the largest of firms that we have currently in Allinial Global, that they're the ones who have already started to hire up the expertise in ESG. They're hiring those that have worked in sustainability for 10 years inside a larger corporation. They're bringing them into their firm. They're the full-time advisor to be able to make it happen. I think there's a lot of education. So for us to create this community, here are the firms that are available right now. If your firm's not quite ready, but your client is asking, now you have the alignment to make it happen. You could work with that other firm to do that. I think that's what having association membership is all about. And I think that I keep telling our member firms, I don't ever want to hear that you lost a client because the client felt that they outgrew you. And I think every small firm has that opportunity to make sure that they're well aligned, whether they stay aligned inside of their organizations. And I think professional bodies inside of each country should provide some level of expertise around it. So same thing that we're doing globally, identify who the experts are inside of the firms, inside of your country, get those folks together, have them start to create those white papers to say, these are the things that you should be looking for in your client. These are how it's going to make it happen. Some white papers. That ice cream manufacturer example I gave, by the way, because of that knowledge, we actually wrote a white paper at AICPA about that. So our small firms were able to see exactly what happened. So education like crazy. You know, the IFRS Foundation, they have become the consolidator of a couple of these sustainability bodies to create the ISSB, being well aligned with the ISSB and seeing what they're doing and getting that information disseminated to your member firms inside of the professional bodies, I think becomes real critical.
Okay, excellent. What you're saying somewhat reminds me of what Barry Melanson was saying a few years ago, and possibly still is to this day, and that is that the AICPA no longer thinks in terms of the CPA firm, but the CPA-led firm. And I guess, could you sort of explain to us exactly what he had in mind there when he referred to the CPA-led firm? In case
I think when you look at the evolution of firms, the transformation, and I talked a little bit about some of the transformation. You know, we're so used to this pyramid. We hire a lot of people at that entry level, and then we hope and pray that they stay till the next level. And then we hope and pray that they make it beyond that level, and then eventually they become partner. Now, not all partners have been designed because they were the best and brightest in that big pool that we created, but they're the ones who just decided to stick around, right? And so now as part of the education and all these things, well, in a lot of the firms that we've seen in the US, and this is happening in some of the larger networks and some of the larger associations around the world, that the advisory space has become so strong and aligned inside of the accountancy firm that it has created this sense of need, like the ESG example I said, bringing in a sustainability expert. Those are all part of the team. They're never going to become a CPA. They're never going to become a CA. They're never going to hold the credential of the accountancy body that's there, but they are going to be well aligned inside the firm. So advisory coming in with accountancy, having both aspects. Data scientists. I mean, data scientists are necessary today for the audit, the traditional audit that we do. There are firms hiring data scientists, again, who will never get the professional body credential in that particular market. And so we've seen in the US, the top 100 firms, about 20% of their new hires over the last 10 years have been non-accounting majors coming into the firms. And so these new hires keep taking over more and more. But it's still led by the CPA. And ultimately, this is what I've said, this audit function, and so many people want to talk about the commoditization, that the audit has become a commodity. There's no value. We keep getting pressured on value and price. And I completely disagree with that. I think there's still an ultimate value in an audit. Now I'm a reformed auditor. That's what I did when I was in practice. But the audit creates trust in the marketplace. We can never forget that that's where we started from, was the audit. Everything else we have permission to do, talking about ESG, talking about advisory, CAS, all these other things, is because of the trust we built in the marketplace on who we are based on doing the audit. And we can never forget that. But we are doing all these other things. So CPA-led, accountancy body, professional certification-led firms that are providing all these other business services to the client.
Well, like you, Mark, and I think like many people in the room, we all started out as auditors, and it's going back some years now, but it's quite encouraging to hear you say that the audit is quite central to a lot of to the prosperity of the profession because of the trust that it helps to foster. Now, in this morning's conversation, we focus very much on what we at EFA had picked up as a couple of high revenue growth areas for the future. And inevitably, one of those was sustainability services. And we've just discussed the advisory, the reporting, the assurance around that. And the other one was around intellectual property. And the reason, of course, for us to have discussed intellectual property is that this is where we are all today, in an auditorium at the European Union's Intellectual Property Office. And EFA has a memorandum of understanding with Aicpa. And a part of that memorandum of understanding is working with our professional bodies in providing training, awareness and training around some of the basic services that small and medium-sized practices could offer their SME clients in relation to intellectual property. One of the figures quoted this morning from the opening presenter, the Deputy Executive Director of Aicpa, was that barely 10% of companies, 10% of small companies in the European Union register, for example, their intellectual property. Anyway, the reason I mention this is I'd be keen to learn from you what you consider to be the major growth areas in future service provision. We've already touched on sustainability. You've touched on a couple of the others. Is there anything else that we're missing that we haven't already picked up on?
The client accounting, as I mentioned, and that goes from, and we talk a lot about getting to what now is CAS 2.0, so there's evolution of it. It's not just the bookkeeping, the ingestion. As technology continues to advance that, it's the advisory on top of that. Being that outsourced CFO for our clients becomes really important, picking particular niches to do that. And, you have, public interest entities, PIs that are, these not-for-profits, these human services organizations that are out there that can't well afford to pay for the level of expertise that they need. Why not hire a firm? Why not create that niche inside of a small firm to be able to provide it only for that? So it's not about just any one of these clients that are coming in and doing it. It is being purposeful to say, all right, if I'm going to do human service PI organizations, and I'm going to say that I'm going to provide, outsourced accountancy all the way up to CFO. I'm going to pick the technology stack. I'm going to do the bill pay, the GL, the ERP, all of that. I'm going to build a technology stack around this, and I'm going to tell the client they're going to come on that, and I'm going to automate how I do a chart of accounts, general ledger, financial statement, and every new client I bring within that particular industry becomes more profitable than the one prior. So more firms today, and it isn't necessarily always about creating a new service line, but how we deliver to the marketplace is changing. So rather than so focused on the service, It's more service focused on the industry and creating the right industry vertical to go to market differently, to say we are specialists. As small firms, small firms are like, well, we can't do that. We're too small to be able to focus on all these different industries. You're right. So rather than having 15 industries, you have one or two or five or whatever it is that you can handle, but you pick that, you go deep, that creates the profitability. And CAS is a great example to be able to start in that. You mentioned intellectual property. Now, a lot of what we're seeing in small firms globally is getting more with, you have the entrepreneur that we've had as clients forever and a day inside the business community. But what about, high net worth individuals, wealth management, family office as a part of it that kind of stems off of CAS, but there are more and more families with these big trusts and these big ways that they do business that they're looking for someone to be able to manage their day-to-day in a different way. And so I think family office on that. And then you got into intellectual property. We've seen intellectual property engagements all over the world around IP in the entertainment space very easily. And I think what you're saying about intellectual property, getting small businesses to understand, how important it is for them to do that, but then also the tracking mechanism of that. And more of that's becoming automated as well. So it's technology that's going to help the member firm be able to deploy that differently so that we're able to sit there and really kind of audit the IP the way that it happens. So all those put together, technology advisory, we've kind of talked about that a little bit, SOC assurance or ISO assurance reporting and what we do. There's so many things coming at us. The opportunities are kind of endless at this point.
Awesome. Let's just hope we capitalize on those
as
best we can. I'm sure we can. After our discussion, Mark, we will have a session on digitalization, and we're very fortunate today to have the president of CNOAC, which is the French chartered accountancy body. And he's going to be talking a little bit about a new initiative called Dracaris. And I won't take his, I'll let him explain that later on. But it reminded me of the crucial role that professional accountancy organizations should play in relation to digitalization. And I just wondered whether you could briefly explain some of the work that the AICPA is doing with CPA.com, which I understand is a subsidiary of the American Institute.
And there's a couple of channels to that, right? So CPA.com, who, by the way, I still have bi-weekly calls with just to stay on top of everything that's happening. And I've encouraged them as well that we need more of these technology roundtables around the world, and I want them to help me put that together. We will have one eventually in Europe now that travel is starting to open up again. But it is having access to the technology companies. Technology is being able to hear directly from the profession what the professional needs are. So I think professional bodies absolutely need to be talking to the technology companies to say we need more to support who we are as a profession. One of the areas that was, I think, a great example for this was in audit. And as you know, I was involved in what was the creation of the dynamic audit solution, where we went to our top 100 firms or they kind of came to us, but became this joint effort between us and 36 of the top 100s to say, you know what, the audit technology companies are not transforming. We need transformation inside of who we are. How are we going to get this done? The big four are each investing $100 million to transform their audit practice. What about the rest of the profession? And we couldn't just focus on, okay, well, we're going to take care of the next tier firms. It had to be a solution for all firms to be able to implement. And that became very important to say that we needed scalability inside of what we're doing. So, CPA.com, I was working with AICPA. We went out, we asked these firms basically for $50 million, and then partnered with Caseware, and I know a lot of firms are using Caseware as part of their audit methodology in many of the countries in Europe. And so Caseware is working on a cloud technology. AICPA with CPA.com, working with the firms, they're going to create a methodology that's going to sit on top of that. It's going to be far more risk-based auditing than we're doing today, getting away from the checklist, being able to populate an audit program based on what the actual needs are of the client. And it's a 4-year project. They're in year 2.5-ish right now. And the idea always was, when we were finished with the US version of that, is creating some level of an international version to be able to do that. Now, I think professional bodies, they can contact the AICPA, see if they can get involved in that process. We, as a global organization, are very actively in conversations about this and watching it very closely. We have 5 of our member firms are part of the 36 who are building it. So we have direct access into what's happening. Those 5 firms for us will then help the rest of our US firms with implementation, those who choose to do it. And then they'll be able to help then globally with our other member firms to do the same thing. It's going to take time, but we need to transform that audit before the audit devalues itself. Not that we could do that, but we need to stay on top of that and make sure that we're transforming how we're doing the audit.
That's very encouraging to hear. And in fact, in the session that follows, we do actually have one of the moderators. It works for Caseware in Belgium. I'd now like to see if there's any questions from the audience. I'm stepping forward because the lights are such that I can't actually see the audience where I'm standing at the table. And I just wondered if you could put up your hands if you have a question. Just give us a wave. And then wait for a microphone to come to you. And then if you can just announce who you are, where you're from, and pose the question. So I think I can see Robert. You're right in the middle. It's very difficult to get to you, but Sarah's just delivering the microphone.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to go back for a while on sustainability. My name is Robert Mull. I'm working at the Dutch Professional Accounting Organization, the Royal MBA. And I attended a conference in the United States last year in December. It was organized by the AICPA, and also the SEC was addressing their issues. And the leadership of SEC and AICPA were very positive about the possibilities for accountants to get acquainted with sustainability and to get their job together on that issue. But there was also a poll at that moment, and among the more than 2,000 attendees, and then the outcome of the poll was quite negative. Most of the regular CPAs were quite negative about why should we take up this task? We have already so much to do. It's much more a political thing, especially now Biden has appointed Democrats into the SEC leadership. So it makes me a bit worrying that we can all present this information about sustainability to our members, but the regular member, is he or she really interested to take it up, or already busy enough with his worries from nowadays?
Thank you, Robert. Could you hear that, Mark? I
could, yes. Robert, thank you for that. And I will say that, yes, we are incredibly busy doing things that 10 years from now may not be quite as relevant, or we may not be doing. So in a lot of the conversations we're having with our member firms, it really is about freeing up and looking at what the future opportunities are. It's hiring additional people in different roles, not in the traditional roles that we have. To your point, that was probably the AICPA SEC conference when you said 2,000 people, that I knew generally which conference that was at. The SEC did come out and say that they were requiring some level of a sustainability report to be attached with their SEC filing. So that's the first in the regulatory space. Could it be overturned? coming out of next year's elections, quite possibly. But I also think that the train's left the station. It's not up to the U.S. or the SEC to do that. And what I found over my years at the AICPA is that and I love every one of our members, but they are quite negative. We all are negative as CPAs and CAs and professional accountants everywhere that we are. And so what they'll wait for, and I've heard this time and again, is they're going to wait to be forced to do it. And I've had this before when we've asked polls of our members when I was at AICPA to say, all right, we have this new tool. We think it's awesome. You need to sell it to your client. What's the best way to deploy it in the marketplace? And the answer basically came back overwhelmingly, make me. You know what? Put a regulation or a standard in that I have to follow. And then I could go to my client and say, well, geez, I'm being made to do this. So now you got to do it, which isn't always the greatest sale, right? So I think having a different conversation with our clients, but in Europe, you know what? Sustainability is already there. It's already happening. And what's happening internationally with the IFRS Foundation, that's the leadership. And there are firms already in the US and elsewhere around the globe that are already providing this service. So it's not like this is something, and it's not a reserved service for the largest of firms, but it's definitely something that's going to take over. I mentioned SOC. When we were there and SOC replaced another standard that was there years ago, and I'm at AICPA, and I can't tell you the amount of negative feedback we received from the market from our member firms saying, you know what, this is a terrible brand. It's never going to work. What are you thinking? What are you doing? And at that point, there was very limited marketplace for it. Now there are tens of thousands of SOC 2 reports that are happening on an annual basis on something that didn't exist 15 years ago. And I will tell you that there are more and more firms each and every day that are continuing to see that. I see this as the visionary aspect. How do firms free up to do it? You know what? I used to say, rank your ABCs and get rid of your Ds. We got to start looking at our practice and say, you know what? We can't be everything to every client. We need to start looking at what we would consider to be our D clients, and we need to fire them, unfortunately, to free up capacity to work on that bigger work that's going to be more profitable, that's going to lead us into the future, because we can't keep doing it the way we're doing it today.
That's very interesting, Mark. And I think this morning we heard from Monica. Monica Forster is here from the IFAC SMP advisory group. And one of the messages she gave to us was to prioritize, or for SMPs to prioritize what they're doing, what they're offering. Anybody else for some questions? Please put up your hand and we'll get the microphone to you. I can't see any more at the moment. I'm sure there are lots of burning questions. Any technology questions, for example? No? Okay, I will ask you one last question, Mark, and that is, what then is the future for the SMP in Europe? Is it a bright future for us? Are we going to grapple with all these opportunities, make the most of them? Or are we going to be sour-faced for the next few years and not move sideways? What's the outlook for us?
The world is your oyster. I mean, it is just, the opportunities are endless today. I believe every one of us could be more profitable tomorrow by being able to offer these additional services and getting higher up on the value chain inside of what we do. And I realize there's some that'll say, my client will never pay for this. My client will never go for it. I'm in constant pressure with my client. Well, you know, the laws of economics tell me that there is supply and there is demand. And so the demand on our services today are absolutely incredible, and our supply continues to shrink. When that happens, pricing automatically has to go up. So why isn't our pricing going up inside of what we do? And if a client's not willing to pay it, there is another client out there that will. And that's how we have to be focused. And if it's not another client in the existing service doing, it's going to be another client in these new services that we're talking about, but we got to free up capacity to do it. And profitability is why we're in business. I get it. You know what? I loved every one of my clients. I was at the christenings, I was at the bar mitzvahs, I was at the weddings, I was at the funerals. But at the end of the day, we still ran a business, and we had to price our clients accordingly in order to keep the people happy that we have inside of our organizations. And so as small firms, you are still competing against the big four for talent. With pricing has to remain to be able to be competitive in how we pay for salaries. And I think focusing on some of these new service lines and things that are highly profitable and exciting, to be honest, for the younger generation, that they're going to want to work on these things, is going to be the attractors to the profession. And that's going to help every one of our small and medium practices that are out there.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mark. It's nice to end on a positive note. And like you, I have a lot of confidence in the profession, in the small and medium practices here in Europe. Well, I think we've proven time and time again that we're able to rise to the challenge, and I'm hopeful that we will in the coming years and go on and prosper. So, Mark, thank you so much for joining us from New York. I know it's 8:45 in the morning, I guess. So I guess you can now go get breakfast and get on with your working day. It's just a pity you can't join us in the sun here, but as you say, there's very good reasons why you weren't able to today. But thanks once again for being with us. Thank
Paul,
you.
thank you. Shout out to Ramon at Adade, who is one of our member firms. He's already chatted me up this morning. I look forward to our lunch when I get there in a couple of weeks. And, you know, thank you, everyone. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference.